Hey guys, this presentation is going to focus on the concept of the diversity of life. So what we're going to be looking at here is all of the major groups that you have on Earth. Now, you can spend your entire life simply studying the different groups that you have in terms of living organisms on our planet. In fact, you could focus down on just one of these groups and spend your whole life studying on them. So obviously we can't go through every species on the planet. We can't go in super great detail for every living thing on our planet. But what I want to do is give you an overview of the variety and richness of life on Earth so we can then talk about how they interact with each other. And when we talk about ecosystems and how ecosystems interact with one another, we can get an idea of all the different moving parts that we're going to have. All right, so with that in mind, let's take a look at what we want to talk about with this discussion. All right, so the first thing I want to do is go over what we are going to talk about in this video. All right, so there are approximately 8.7 million species on Earth, and we need to take a look at how those are organized and broken down. Because obviously, with 8.7 million known species, and it's estimated that there are way more species that we don't know yet, that we just haven't discovered yet. With that many different species, we gotta find a way to organize them, to sort them, to group them, so we can get an idea of what's going on. So to start off, I want to be able to name the 3 domains and 4 kingdoms of organisms and list some characteristics of each. I want to be able to explain the importance of bacteria and fungi in the environment, describe the role of protists in the ocean, and lastly, describe how organisms interact and depend on each other for survival. So these are some general objectives that we're going to have in going through this video. All right, so first group we got to talk about is Archaea and Bacteria. So Archaea are different from bacteria. All right, the group Archaea is one of the first domains. All right, so Archaea are ancient bacteria that were thought to have possibly arisen actually before regular bacteria did. Now, Archaea are special kind of bacteria. Their genetics are different than the bacteria that you think of like germs. Germs are sometimes bacteria, but Archaea are usually extremophiles. Um, Archaea can live in places like what I've got above me. That is the large or Great Spring of Yellowstone National Park. It is a volcanic hot spring. It has extremely high sulfur content. It's extremely acidic water. The temperature is near boiling. It's putting off a bunch of gases that are poisonous. You don't want to get too close to it because it could actually be extremely dangerous. Somebody was trying to take a picture of them leaning over it just a couple of years ago. They fell in and they died. Um, yeah, if you were to try and go for a swim in this, you would die, and it would hurt the whole time you're dying. But there are bacteria that are able to survive in there because they've got very specialized adaptations that let them do that. Now, if you look over here, you'll see those little blue squiggles and the little green squiggles. Well, those are also bacteria. This is actually an electron micrograph. It's a very special type of microscopic image of bacteria that looks at them up close, gives you a 3-dimensional picture of them. So you can actually see these bacteria on this culturing surface. All bacteria, both eubacteria or true bacteria, or archaea, reproduce through cell division. They divide themselves in half and make a perfect copy of themselves. Unlike all other organisms on Earth, bacteria and archaea lack a nucleus, and that is the center part of a cell. The nucleus is where you and I would store our genetic material. It's the part inside the cell that holds the genetic material and controls the actions of the cell. Bacteria don't have this. They have a plasmid which organizes all of their genetic material, but it's kept inside the cell and there's no internal divisions inside the cell. Bacteria and archaea live in literally every habitat on Earth, from hot springs to even inside the bodies of animals. So, yeah, you actually have bacteria living inside you right now. You have probably several pounds of bacteria that live inside you, and you need them. If you did not have those bacteria in your digestive tract, you actually would not be able to process the majority of the food that you eat. A lot of your digestion is actually aided by symbiotic bacteria that live inside of you. Maybe you've heard of them. They're sold to you as probiotics. They're found in yogurt and things like that. So yeah, you actually need these guys to survive. All right, how about in the environment then? Well, bacteria play a very key role in the environment. They actually help break things down. They help decompose matter and recycle it so it can go back into the environment and be used again. They break it down so that plants can then reabsorb it. They're one of the ways that nature breaks down its waste materials. So if you look above me, what you'll see is you can see the little orange and green and blue bacteria that have been stained in order to show up on this process. Well, they're actually growing and decomposing the surface of a leaf. So that's what this is, an electron micrograph of a leaf that is a dead leaf that is being broken down by bacteria. They recycle nutrients. Some key ones that they help recycle are nitrogen and phosphorus. And certain bacteria can actually convert nitrogen from the air into a form that plants can use. And this is an important conversion because nitrogen is the main component of making protein and genetic material. So without nitrogen, life can't exist. But the nitrogen that's in the atmosphere, 90% of all living organisms can't use it. They can't use it without bacteria first fixing this nitrogen and converting it to a form that can be absorbed by plants, which you can then absorb by eating plants or by eating animals that ate plants. So yeah, this is why bacteria are absolutely critical for survival of life on Earth. Again, over to my side here, you can see that I've got another electron micrograph of some bacteria. This is E. coli. So maybe you've heard of E. coli bacteria before, but let's take a look at them. So bacteria allow many organisms, including humans, to extract nutrients from their food. I already mentioned that. But this bacteria called Escherichia coli, or E. coli, is found in the intestines of humans and other animals. It helps you digest food, but here's the thing to remember, it can also make you sick. So this is one of those things where the bacteria and us, we have to live in a very careful balance, because if you were to ingest E. coli bacteria, even though it already lives inside you, there's a possibility it can make you sick. And there are different species of E. coli, different strains of E. coli, that if it's not a strain that you have in you, your immune system may not recognize it and might freak out and try and kill it. You can have an imbalance of the different types of E. coli in your digestive tract, and that can make you really sick. So if you've heard of getting a stomach illness or things like that from not washing your hands after you go to the bathroom, well, chances are that may actually be E. coli that's causing that. It's E. coli growing too much or being in a part of your digestive tract it's not supposed to be in, or if you shake hands with somebody and they didn't wash their hands, you getting exposed to their E. coli can make you sick. It's a very strange and very delicate balance that we have, but if we didn't have E. coli, we would die. If you have too much E. coli, that can kill you as well. Wow, that's a heck of a balance. It's almost like inside you, you've got a little world in you that has its own ecosystems and stuff that have to be maintained. Crazy to think about, huh? All right, so let's move on. What else do we have? Well, everything else. Okay, so we've covered two of the domains, Archaea, bacteria. Now this is the third domain. This is eukarya, and this is all multicellular life as well as anything that has a nucleus. So if you look above me at the very top, that is a protist. You'll notice that it has those little structures inside of it. Well, those are organelles. Organisms that have organelles, well, they're eukaryotes. You are a eukaryote. You have organelles inside your cells. Those organelles do different jobs. They help keep the cell alive. They help it function. That is a single-celled organism. But everything else that you've got around me, well, the fungus that's over there, the mushrooms, the animals over there, the plants above me, they're all multicellular organisms then. Um, these organisms can reproduce both sexually and asexually, meaning you might have to have a male and female, or some of them can reproduce by splitting themselves in half, or just pulling off parts of them, or just producing offspring without needing anybody else. That guy in the very top, that protist I was talking about, he can reproduce asexually, or he can actually swap genetic material with another protist. Cool trick. Um, Fungus, they can reproduce by budding. You can cut little pieces of them off and have them start growing other places, or they can reproduce sexually with a male and female. Most animals are going to reproduce by having a male and female, although there are animals that exist that are able to just produce offspring without needing a male or female. In fact, there's a species of lizard right here in Arizona called the whip-tailed skink. And the whip-tailed skink is extremely weird because there are no males. Yeah, there are no male whip-tailed skink. Some kind of virus swept through and killed them off over 10,000 years ago. And ever since then, the females have been reproducing asexually with a process called parthenogenesis, which produces an egg that does not need to be fertilized, and it will just birth another female lizard. Cool. And then plants, well, plants can reproduce by pollination, or maybe you've noticed this, you can cut a piece of a plant off sometimes, plant it in the ground, and it will continue to grow. That's called budding or clipping if you're doing it in gardening. All right. So those are 4 kingdoms. You have this one domain, Eukarya, that is divided into 4 kingdoms. You have the fungi, you have the animals, you have the protists at the very top, and then just below them, I got some pictures of plants. Those are the 4 groups inside Kingdom Eukarya. All right, well, let's start breaking these down. And you know where we're going to start? We're going to start with one of my favorite kingdoms. That's going to be the fungi. Hey, you can love them. They're a fun guy. That's a bad joke. All right. Well, a fungus is an organism whose cells have a nuclei. Like all eukaryotes, they have a cell wall, so they've got a rigid structure on the outside of the cell. But they don't have any chlorophyll. They cannot photosynthesize. They are not plants. Mushrooms are not plants. No matter what any vegetarian tries to tell you, they're not plants. All right? They're a separate kingdom. They are fungi. All right? They cannot make their own food. They have to consume other things. So they have a cell wall that acts like a little skeleton that lets them stand up straight, but that cell wall is made out of keratin or chitin, basically the same kind of material that makes your hair and your fingernails. All right? So it is a cell wall made of something that's definitely an animal-like protein, so they're really weird like that. So the mushroom that you see up there, that's actually the reproductive structure of the mushroom. Yeah, remember how I said there's male and female? Those put out the reproductive cells, the gametes. All right. The rest of the fungus, well, that's what you can see underneath there. All right. That's the rest of it you can see underneath there. All right. Down in the dirt. That's called the hyphae. All right. It's an underground network of fibers that absorb food from decaying material. The bodies of most fungi are huge networks of these threads that spread through the soil or dead wood or other material on which the fungus is feeding. They dissolve the material around it, and then they absorb that that nutrient. Sometimes, though, what they'll do is they'll actually grow onto plants and into plant roots. They will absorb material from the surrounding environment and pass it to the plant, and then the plant will give them sugar in return. This is a symbiotic relationship, and they actually can help plants take up extra nutrients, as well as helping plants take up extra water. So they can be very, very important to the ecosystem. And a lot of times, without a healthy fungus ecosystem, you don't have a healthy forest, or you don't have a healthy biome as a result. You could also have some fungus that do other things. So some other ones that can cause disease are things like athlete's foot. And if you look up there at that angle right up there, all right, that's athlete's foot. That's a tinea pedis infection, or a fungal infection of athlete's foot. Maybe some of you have had to deal with this. It's really gross. It itches, it burns, it can cause peeling skin. It's characterized by those flaking, peeling areas of dry, tough, nasty skin, as well as sometimes open sores if it goes on long enough. Best treatment for athlete's foot is, generally speaking, going to be keeping it dry, keeping it clean, clean socks, clean shoes, things like that. But you may need to also use an antifungal cream. All right. Well, you also have other fungus that are used. Well, right there, I got a cross section of blue cheese, and you see how it's all blue and stuff like that. Blue cheese, like blue cheese dressing, like maybe you like that on your hot wings or whatever. That's caused by a different type of fungus. It gives the blue cheese both its color and its flavor. Now, here's an interesting thing. I can eat mushrooms. I can't eat blue cheese. I can eat other cheeses, but blue cheese in particular, I am actually allergic to. So yeah, that's something that can be a little bit different. These different fungi can have different chemicals that they produce that some people are allergic to and some people are not. It's really kind of an interesting thing there in how we interact with them. And then above me, maybe some of you guys know what that is. That is yeast. That is what produces the gas that makes bread rise. So yeast is actually very important for baking breads. And above me, that is actually what's used to make sourdough yeast. The way that it works is by allowing the yeast to continually break down sugars. They produce lactic acid as a byproduct, and that's what gives sourdough bread its tart flavor, is actually a byproduct of that yeast. Yeast is also used in alcoholic fermentation, but you guys, you don't use that. All right. All right. So that's fungus that we've talked about. Let's talk about the next group, protists. Okay. So protists sound a little weird, and they might not be things that you really think of all that much, but protists include things like amoebas. All right. So protists are a diverse group of organisms that belong to that kingdom Protista. Some of them are amoebas, like the ones you see above you. Others are plant-like, such as kelp. Might call them plankton. Yeah, you can have microscopic protists that are tiny single-celled organisms that photosynthesize, and they're incredibly important for the aquatic ecosystems. Many of them are actually very necessary in terms of supplying food to marine ecosystems. They also play a key role in fixing nitrogen and converting carbon dioxide into usable sugars for aquatic and marine ecosystems. Most protists are going to be unicellular microscopic organisms. They include diatoms, which float on the ocean surface, but some of them may also include things like plasmodium. Now, plasmodium you can see right there. That plasmodium right there is what causes malaria. Malaria is an incredibly deadly disease. Over 500,000 people die every year from malaria, and have been dying every year from malaria for so long that they've actually influenced our genetics. Yeah, there are people that have a rare condition, well, rare for many parts of the world, but in some parts of the world it's not. They have a rare condition that has actually caused their blood to change shape, their blood cells to change shape. It's called sickle cell anemia. And sickle cell anemia is caused by a specific genetic difference that makes those people who have it very resistant to malaria, because we've been dealing with malaria literally for as long as humans have existed. Okay? Malaria is a very dangerous disease. Like I said, it's killed 500,000 people this year, the year before, the year before that, the year before that, the year before that. And that's actually what the rates have gone down to. It used to kill more people every year. It's a huge number of people dying every year from malaria. It is one of the deadliest diseases in the world. And many of you may not have ever heard of it, and I'm pretty sure none of you have ever had it. It is a disease that's found in tropical regions and places like sub-Saharan Africa, many places in South America. It was spread around the world due to trade and things like that, and it's transmitted by mosquitoes carrying those little guys, those plasmodium. Very dangerous disease. All right. So next group, plants. All right. Okay, guys. I don't think I need to tell you what a plant is. You all have a general idea of a plant, but let's go through that. Plants are multicellular. All plants are multicellular. They have more than one cell. They make their own food using sunlight for energy. They need water, carbon dioxide, and light to make food. Most plants live on land where they use their leaves to get sunlight. They get oxygen. They produce oxygen and carbon dioxide. They absorb carbon dioxide. When they're absorbing water and nutrients, they use the soil and they use their roots for that. Leaves are connected by vascular tissue, which has thick cell walls and serves like almost like blood vessels for the plant that move water and food around. All right, guys. So if you look up at the top there, that is a chloroplast. That is the part inside of plant cells that lets them photosynthesize. The lumen takes in energy from light, and then when being exposed to carbon dioxide, the chlorophyll is able to activate, use that energy from the sun, recombine the carbon dioxide, split it apart, get the carbon out of it, combine that carbon with water, make glucose, sugar, and then spit out the oxygen as a waste product. All right, cool. Then you have the parts of the leaf right over here. And you can see that you've got the veins, the ribs, the whole blade, and then the base of the leaf. Those are the basic structures of a leaf. I think most of you guys are pretty familiar with plants. I mean, come on, they're plants. I know we live in Arizona, but is the general idea here. All right, then let's talk about animals. All right. Now, these are probably going to be the most charismatic of the organisms on Earth. When we think of organisms, a lot of times the first thought we come to is animal, lion, giraffe, something like that. All right. But if you look above me, that's a picture of an animal cell. All right. It is different from a plant cell because it has no cell wall. It's different from a fungal cell because it has no cell wall. You will notice that it is similar to a protist cell, though, because it has a nucleus. It has different shapes. It's got all these different parts to it. But here's the thing. Animals can't make their own food. Protists sometimes can. Plants can. They have to take their food from the environment. And animal cells, while they don't have cell walls, they do form structures. And in addition to that, they're more mobile. So almost all animals are mobile in at least one stage of their life. And all animals are multicellular. All right? Every animal on Earth is multicellular. Okay? Part of the requirement for being an animal is being multicellular. All right. So let's break down the animals a little bit. Let's talk about the larger group of animals, the invertebrates. So this is a small selection of them. Something like 2/3 of all animals on Earth or more are invertebrates. Most of them insects. So invertebrates are animals that don't have backbones. They have no backbone, so they have usually an exoskeleton or a soft body. Many of them live attached to hard surfaces on the ocean. They filter their food out of water, and that includes corals, mollusks, worms, all sorts of stuff like that. But other invertebrates, including squid in the ocean and insects on land, actively move around and search for food. You also have crayfish, which you see above me. They're like lobsters. You have sea urchins. They're able to move. You have the whelk, which is like a type of snail, basically, that lives in the ocean. It's able to move around. You have sponges. You have fresh and saltwater sponges. You have the sea anemone, flatworms, roundworms, and then you have, again, organisms like the centipede, the fly, and the spider that are arthropods that live on land. More insects actually exist on Earth than any other type of animal. There are more insects than any other type of animal. A vast majority of all animals are insects, all right? There is an estimated something like 1.5 million species. Okay, remember, there's 8 million species total on Earth. There's an estimated 1.5 million species of beetle on Earth. Just beetles. That's not including any other kinds of insects, including wasps, flies, spiders, things like that. Now, here's the thing. It's estimated that there actually may be more types of wasp than there are beetles, but we haven't studied them well enough yet. Because what we're finding out is for every species of insect that we can find, there's a species of wasp that eats it. And many times there is only one species of wasp that eats it. Many times there's a species of wasp that will eat many kinds of insects, but yeah, it's possible there might be more wasps than any other type of animal on the planet. Scary, huh? All right. Well, then let's try the other side of animals, and we'll talk about vertebrates instead of invertebrates. So vertebrates, these are animals that have a backbone, and you can see the groups that they are arrayed into above me. All right. Vertebrates are animals that have a backbone. It includes mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Okay? Those are the major groups of invertebrates. The first invertebrates were fish, but today there are 4 groups of invertebrate that live on land. All right? So, if you start with my diagram above me, you'll see that you start with amphibians. Amphibians have to lay their eggs in water, but they can live their lives on land, like toads and frogs. You have birds. Birds also lay eggs, but they don't have to put their eggs in the water. They have feathers, wings. They have a 4-chambered heart like you do. They have lungs to breathe air. They are all warm-blooded. All right. Again, dwelling on land, although some of them have returned to the ocean. Then you have fish. All fish live in water. All right. Some fish are able to go on land for a short period of time, but all fish live the majority of their life in water. They use gills to breathe, and they have to keep those gills wet in order to breathe. You have mammals. Mammals are warm-blooded. All mammals have hair. Yes, all mammals have hair. Did you know that dolphins have hair? Yeah. In fact, baby dolphins are born with a beard. They have little fuzzy chin hairs. It's kind of cute, kind of weird. They quickly wear away from swimming through the ocean constantly. They do fall out later on, but all mammals have hair at least one point in their life or in at least one part of their body. They're warm-blooded. They give birth to live young, so they're carried inside the mother. And then lastly, you have reptiles. Reptiles lay eggs. They usually have dry skin, often covered in scales. Some of them do live in the water, but many of them do actually live on land, and most reptiles are actually pretty well adapted for living on land. The first land invertebrates were actually reptiles. They were successful because they were the first organisms to develop a waterproof egg. Now, these are the first animals that lived entirely on land, their whole life cycle, not just part of their life cycle. Unlike amphibians over there in the corner, all right, which spend a portion of their life cycle in the water, all right? So, that's where I want to leave you. But before I go, what I want to show you is one more thing. Do you guys see this thing next to me? That is called the tree of life. I know it doesn't look much like a tree. It's actually kind of a spiral design. But this is a diagram that shows the diversity of all life on Earth. And if you look carefully, you can see the different groups that we've talked about. All right? You have Archaea, Bacteria, Amoebozoa, okay, which is a type of protist. You have Archaea plastida, which is, again, an ancient type of protist. You have fungus, and then you have this big blue group that arches across the top called metazoa. That is all plants. That is all animals. All right? Now, here's the thing. We're constantly discovering new organisms. This is just showing the major groups of them. So you see those lines that this gets down to at the very end? One of those lines includes the group primate. And that's where we are with monkeys, apes, and everything like that. So when you look at this giant wheel, I hope that you guys kind of get an idea of how many different groups there are on the planet. We can't go through all of them in this class, unfortunately, but I want you guys to have an idea that this right here, this representation of it, it doesn't even get down to the level of individual species. It just gets down to the level of groups. And there are so many living organisms on our planet. And each of them has a specific role that they fill in an ecosystem. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the diversity of life. When I talk about biodiversity, this diagram, this is it. All right? And yeah, there's a lot to it. And so what we're going to be talking about next is we're going to be looking at how all of these systems interact with one another. Why are these different groups important, and what roles do they play, and how does that fill out our ecosystem? All right, guys, that's all for today. That's my time. You take care. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.